Curious how you could help improve the health and well-being of your staff? Get insights, cost savings opportunities, and disease prevention at your fingertips with Springbuck Health Data Analytics. Learn more at springbuck.com.
The Ride with JMV on 93.5 and 107.5. The Fan.
Hey, let's get started on a Tuesday. Thank you for joining us. And I'm going to tell you what, Indianapolis and the professional teams, it is just rapid-fire injuries. When was the last time that either one of these organizations had good news that went back-to-back that didn't have some type of injury news or bad news interwoven with the good? It is amazing. But at some point, you would have to think that the bad luck of Mr. Karma would get up off of Indianapolis.
JMV's style of calling it like he sees it has translated into a very popular radio show and a massive following over the years. You can hear him on Afternoon Drive in Central Indiana, mixing sports talk with pop culture.
1980, you could go the Urban Cowboy soundtrack and Johnny Lee's Looking for Love in All the Wrong Places, Looking for Love in Too Many Spaces, Looking for Lies, Looking for Traces of What I'm Dreaming Of. Yeah, Urban Cowboy from 1980. Well, the midnight headlight driving on a rainy night seat. You know, the windshield wipers slapping out a tempo, keeping perfect rhythm with the song on the radio. Eddie Rabbitt's awesome.
A tune about driving a car during the rain? Well, befitting for a guy who worked at a PBS station in college doing weather, then moved on to juggle records at a Bloomington station while working full-time at a tire shop. You're in for an interesting ride on this edition of the Business and Beyond podcast with Indiana's own JMV. Hello and welcome to the Business and Beyond podcast presented by PNC. I'm Gary Dick. John Michael Gliva was born about 20 miles south of Bloomington in Owensburg, Indiana. He graduated from Eastern Greene High School, attended Vincennes University, eventually graduating from Indiana State in 1993. The broadcasting bug hit JMV very early. Initially, he wanted to be on the music side of radio. That's where he spent the first years of his career at B97 in Bloomington. But he got burned out to an extent, left radio and worked some odd jobs, including in the mortgage loan business, before landing at WNDE in Indianapolis in 1999. It was there he ditched John Michael Gliva on the air and went with JMV, and it has stuck ever since. He made the jump to Indy sports talk station The Fan in 2010, and the ride with JMV was born. And I'm pleased to be joined on the podcast this week by John Michael Gliva, better known to Central Indiana listeners as JMV. John, great to have you on the podcast.
Gary, it is fantastic of you to ask me to be on this podcast, man. It's an honor. Thank you.
Hey, you are a long way from Greene County, brother. You know, and I'm a long way from Vermilion County too, so not too far away. Did you ever think? I mean, it sounds like you've had an interest in broadcasting and radio for a long, long time. But as you think way back, I mean, did you ever envision anything like this, being really on the top of the heap when it comes to sports talk here in Indiana?
No, you know what? Not until even further in my career, because when you think about it, we had one class of communications in high school back at Eastern Greene, and that was journalism. So that was it. I didn't really get a chance to actually be and do radio things until I went to Vincennes for my first 2 years right out of high school in 1988. And no, I mean, it's tough because nobody really had done that before. And my interest, Gary, started on the music side of things. I used to be the guy that would put, a tape recorder in a jam box. And, that's how, you would mix songs and go from one song to the other. I was always interested in the on-air aspect of radio and music. I mean, I love the music, don't get me wrong, but I liked how, folks back in the day like Jim and John Trout of WZPL and, listening to some of the greats back then, how they transitioned from, Scott Wheeler's another guy that also comes to mind, transitioned from one music source to the other and hit the post and just sound like it is so exciting that was the only place you wanted to be. And that's kind of how all this started for me. It was just kind of the interest, more so than just the music. It was the interest in how these folks were transitioning between one music source to the other, how they were talking it up, how they were describing to me things I didn't know. Because, in GC, much like you in Vermilion County, there wasn't a lot of opportunity to listen to music. I mean, we got B97 basically played top 40 stuff, but there were some artists in the 80s when I grew up, like Simple Minds or Squeeze and stuff you only heard in a John Hughes film. I mean, that's basically where you heard it nowhere else. And it just kind of interests me how DJs at that time would transition, especially then because they were using records, how they would transition to one or the other while also being incredibly entertaining. So that probably got the itch going more so than anything else back in the day.
Yeah. We'll get this out of the way early because a lot of people always wonder about it. I called you John, but JMV, so many people only know you by JMV. Give us the quick explanation how you got that JMV tag, which is now resonates so much here in Indiana.
When I started at WNDE, I would come in on a Sunday morning and I would produce something called the Jiffy Lube Sports Show. And that would be a combination of your Bill Benner, a Conrad Brunner, and a Tim Bragg, who back in the day was the host over at WNDE. And they did a show on a Sunday morning. And Conrad Brunner was the first to say, hey, John Michael, what about Jan Michael Vincent? And then when I started working and producing for Mark Patrick, the legendary local voice around here for so many years, he just took it to an entirely different level. And what I really enjoyed about it is I just went with it. I thought this is a guy that's doing everything right now. He's doing Wish, he's doing the lottery, he's doing the Bob and Tom show. He gets national love as well. So whatever he says I'm going to be. And I played off of that. And he's the one, after Bruno was the first one, I think, to mention it, but Mark absolutely took it to a different level. And I stayed with it. It went from John Michael Vincent to the illegitimate son of Jan Michael Vincent. That's kind of how Mark framed it up, as I was the illegitimate son of the former actor, the now deceased actor, Jan Michael Vincent. And he Gary, took it to an entirely different level, honestly. And it was just something that I went with, and it worked. And I got to give credit where credit is due to Mark, because among those great things he did, he sure as heck did that for me.
Yeah. Hey, you mentioned Mark Patrick and some of the things, he was a dynamo back in the day, man. He was everywhere on TV, on sports, the lottery, you name it. I know he played a role in your career, certainly. Would you consider him a mentor? What's your relationship with Mark?
You know what? A lot of things I have a really good relationship with his son, Drew Storm, the former major league pitcher who lives here in town, and we talk often. Mark lives, I think, down somewhere in the Appalachian Mountains and just kind of is enjoying stuff right now. But he taught me a lot that, Gary, I don't think I realized until I got further down the road. Like, just by observing what he did, how he communicated, how he put together segments, things of that nature, how he interacted, how he juggled, as you mentioned a little bit earlier, just a number of jobs. As you described him as a dynamo, he had 1,000 things going on at that time. And I don't think I truly understood the scope of what he was doing and how it was done and how difficult it is until I got further down the road. So yeah, the stuff that I learned from him is the stuff that maybe in that moment I didn't truly get, but now being 51 years of age and at least being at this station for the past 10 years is something I absolutely get now. And really that's both sides. That's behind the microphone on the radio. That's, doing TV or whatever the case. I mean, he has been right and accurate and really did kind of stake that path back then. I just probably wasn't smart enough at that moment, or certainly savvy enough to recognize it.
Yeah. Thinking back to doing sports talk radio back then compared to today, how has sports talk radio, in your view, in particular here in Indianapolis, how has it changed? How is it different than it was all those years ago?
Well, I mean, it certainly can have a little bit more of an edge to it than it did back then, because if you remember, Mark was the only guy that was doing it back then.
Right.
I mean, he was the only guy around here who was doing it. And then I think you had 950 with Greg Rakestraw kind of popped up. And then ultimately, this place, The Fan, popped up, I think, in somewhere around 07 or 08. But it was kind of like a newspaper, right? I mean, it really was. It was like a newspaper, or you talk about the local stuff, which what everybody wants to hear, but you just didn't have the incredible options, Gary, that you have today. And I think that's what we're all competing with, because there are so many different options on how people can ultimately get the information that they want. And that's why I try to never forget in doing this show is that we offer people around here something that nobody else is going to give them, because nobody else cares. Nobody else at ESPN cares about what goes on here in Indy unless Andrew Luck retires. That's about it. So you give people around here what they want. And to me, that will maintain at least my love for local radio and the interest in local radio, which at times, Gary, can be challenging because there are so many different options as technology evolves. But yeah, that's one of the things and reasons how it changed. I mean, I go back to playing cards. I go back to, I mean, you put people on hold on a phone bank and blinking light lines and things like that. I mean, technology wise, it absolutely has changed. You don't even really need radio anymore if you wouldn't, because so many people are streaming, and we of course embrace streaming and the app and all of this now as well. But that's probably the biggest change is technology and the options you have now compared to what you may have had or may not have had 20 years ago.
Yeah, and a big part, I think, of your formula, if you will, is pop culture. You got to weave that in and mix that in as part of the entertainment mix. And I think it's right up your alley. Back to your love of music, right?
Yeah,
and really works out well.
Well, it's funny, too, because I try to keep it as straightforward and what I believe people are interested in on that day as possible. And it all revolves around, again, the content you're not going to get anywhere else, and that is local content here. But I will tell you this, during the pandemic, I got with Sean Copeland over at B105.7, which is just next door to the fan station up on the 6th floor here at MS Worldwide. And I said, hey, how about letting me come in and hosting all request show music wise? And I was just kind of screwing around a little bit because, I mean, nothing was going on in sports at that time. I thought, how about coming in on a Saturday night, and I would do it until 6 until 10, and I'd take all requests or whatever. And for some reason, he gave it the okay, and it's called the JMV Takeover, and I've been doing it ever since. 6 until midnight it goes now. And I play I stay in the 80s decade, sometimes in the 70s, sometimes in the 90s, but it is an all request show, Gary, and it is something that has taken off so incredibly that it really makes me feel good. The fact that this is what people around here want, that I think any longer, because it's so easy to voice track, not be actually on the air when you are on the air, utilizing technology so much. We do forget about, I think at times, what you lose. And the people want their opinion just like they do on sports talk radio. They want it heard, they want it presented, and they want to be a part of something. And that's something, musically speaking, around here that certainly on the weekend is a rarity, but is becoming during the weekdays also very rare. That to me, this Saturday night show I've been doing for the better part of a year now has kind of struck a chord with folks, stuff that's been so prominent in the past that you remember, that brings back the great times, the times that you had back in the day, that I do every night for 6 hours now on B105.7. And it has taken off like I had never expected. It was just kind of me screwing around, Gary. That was it.
That's outstanding. I see a lot of great traction on social media for it as well. John, in terms of content, sports content on the show, I've got to believe that sports content in a market like Indianapolis kind of ebbs and flows over the course of a year. Is this time of year, the fall, is there anything bigger from a conversation driver than the Colts in the NFL?
Nah, there's not. I mean, Colts every day, all day. Because again, we should be more focused. This is my opinion, and somebody that's been in radio may disagree, but we offer up the local angle. And Gary, people around here want Colts, and more Colts. And that's what we're going to give them. Granted, you can bring up occasionally what may be going on in the MLB playoffs or the wild card or whatever. And, obviously the Pacers are starting up in the preseason, but right now it's about the Colts. And if you rolled in and just started talking about all this national stuff that's going on, you're not giving the people, at least in my estimation, what they want around here. But they want Colts, and nothing but Colts, because if you gave them anything else, they'd go someplace else. And you don't want to give people a reason to go anywhere else. And that's been my philosophy over the years. And I think I'm even more entrenched in that philosophy as we see technology and the more options that you have to take away your attention from local radio evolve.
Yeah. As you think about interviewing, John, and in your view, I've always been of the opinion the best interviewers are the best listeners. But what, in your view, as you get, especially as you talk to athletes and, who sometimes can be, kind of give the cliche lines, or coaches, managers give the cliche lines and talk, a certain narrative. I've always been impressed by your ability to make interviews interesting. How do you do that? What, in your view, is key to a good sports interview?
I think early on, you got to make, especially if it's somebody that you don't know, feel really comfortable. Yeah. I mean, I think that is the key right there. And then as they feel comfortable, I think the interview gets better as it goes along. Now, there are some that just aren't. I mean, because you can get guys that are going to end up being jaded from the past, who are just doing it because they're told to do it. And I get it too. And I don't begrudge them whatsoever, but I think it's all about the start of the interview. It's all about making them feel as comfortable as possible in talking to you, and, not making them give those quick answers because they want to, get the heck off the air or whatever with you right now. It's about maintaining that level of comfort. And then I think they may be more apt to go into some places where at the beginning of the conversation, they sure as hell wouldn't, but maybe as we get toward the end, maybe they would be more interested in going someplace where they thought they wouldn't. So I think it's all about setting that stage and creating that comfort zone for somebody that certainly doesn't know you and would not initially have that level of comfort in talking to you or anybody else for that matter.
Yeah. Remember any interviews? I've had a few over the years where you knew right from the beginning, this was not going to be good.
Kelvin Sampson, when he got the IU job, hung up on me.
Yeah, tell me, because I remember hearing you tell that on the air. Go tell that story.
Yeah, he hung up on me. He, I don't know if somebody had told him, so I wasn't a fan of him getting the job back then. I wasn't a fan at all. And what's the difference? When he was the Oklahoma coach, Oklahoma came in and played Purdue up at West Lafayette, and I think that was the swan song season for Gene Cady. He came on and he talked, Gary, and talked forever. But then when he got the IU job, he just seemed a lot different. You could tell from the outset he seemed different. He seemed jaded. And I kind of wondered if somebody would have let him know that I wasn't a fan of him being hired there. But at the very end of the conversation, I think we went on for maybe 5 or 6 minutes. I don't even know where the interview is now. But 5 or 6 minutes, at the very end, he said this. And this is a quote. He said, "John, you know what we got to realize? We got to realize that we have to have a big layer of thick skin, both of us." And that was that. He hung up. He ended it just like that. And it was odd. It was awkward. And you could kind of tell that he had been listening to folks say, hey, he's not the right guy for that IU job, which ultimately, as far as the coach is concerned, he's a good coach, but he certainly wasn't the right guy for that job as we have seen. And then, the Adam Schefter stuff back in the day was kind of weird too, because we, even when he was at the NFL Network before he had ESPN, and certainly the highest level of being the newsbreaker in the NFL or football for that matter, he was always short and awkward, and not just in stature, but just kind of short in general. Short in general. And there was never a comfort level. And I always recognized that. And we get to, this was when the combine was still held in Lucas Oil Stadium. We had our little radio row right there. I was sick on this particular day. It was on the same day, I believe, where the Pacers tried to trade Danny Granger to the Grizzlies, and they didn't make it in time. They tried to make a deal, not Danny Granger. But I think there was a deal that got snuffed out because they didn't make it in time. Anyway, I think it was for Josh McRoberts now that I think about it. But anyway, one of my producers there, it was a promotions guy, said, "Hey, Schefter's there. You want to bring him over?" And I go, we never have good interviews. Don't worry about it, man. I was close. I was sick and wasn't feeling great. So I go to the bathroom and come back for a final segment, and Schefter is sitting right across from where I am. So I go over there, and I thought, we'll make the best of it. And my man answered every question with like 1 or 2 words. Oh. So it was evident. It was evident, Gary, that he didn't want to be there. Yeah. So I was in a pissy, foul mood. So I thought, here's what I want to do. I'm going to make him sit here as long as possible. He doesn't enjoy it. So I basically asked him everything but his favorite color in this interview. I mean, it was so bad. And you could tell, and I knew that it affected him in time because he actually caught up with some folks that I know here locally that are in the reporting TV industry of it, and he told them how much he did not like me, and I was asking all these nonsensical questions, but there was a reason why. It was because he was doing the short answer thing, and we never really hit it off. So he and then Kelvin Sampson, when he got the IU job, those are the two that would stand out to me as the incredibly awkward interviews.
We will have much more with JMV, including the early days in Greene County, Indiana State University, and a lot more. That's when the Business and Beyond podcast returns.
Imagine a world where every healthcare and benefits program decision is backed and guided by data. Springbuck is the health data analytics solution that equips you with the insights and expertise you need to sharpen your benefits strategy, advance employee health, and contain costs. Springbuck, a world of actionable health intelligence insight at your fingertips. Visit springbuck.com to learn more.
Welcome back to the Business and Beyond podcast presented by PNC. My guest this week is Sports Talk Radio's JMV. And John, the early days I mentioned in the first segment, you grew up in Owensburg, that's Greene County, 20 miles or so south of Bloomington. What was, give me a description, what was growing up in Greene County like?
One general store, one in-town post office, a August celebration called Founders Day when the town was founded, riding bikes all over the place, finding a backyard to play baseball in, a little 2-on-2, 3-on-3 baseball, pitcher's hand, a full court basketball, playing basketball all the time. I was lucky enough to grow up with a pool. We were the only one around that had an in-ground pool. So everybody ended up over at our house all the time, riding motorcycles my mom still lives there too. We have 40 acres that butts right up against Crane. Basically everybody around where I grew up in Owensburg's parents worked at, probably still do, worked at Crane. And it was very standby me-ish for the mid 70s to middle to late 80s right there and growing up in Owensburg.
Yeah, good memories. Good
Love it.
childhood. Yeah,
I love it. I go back again. The general store stuff was great because it was straight out of Little House on the Prairie, because the Layman's General Store not only had food, and they had the lift up coolers where you got 16-ounce glass bottles out of. There was nothing like that. But they had workwear and activewear and boots, and because back before, way back when Owensburg was founded, obviously in the late 1800s or whatever, that was the only place to go around where you could shop. So it had everything, and I wouldn't have traded those memories for the world because it was incredibly outstanding and stuff that I think is on a whole, besides us, Gary, very unrecognizable to many decades of kids under the age of 40, people under the age of 40 right now. But I loved it every second.
Well, you obviously left Greene County, but it to me, it comes across on the air and just in talking to you, Greene County has never left you, right? You're still a small town guy at heart.
Yeah, I love my high school. I love Eastern Greene. I love it better as Eastern High School, not Eastern Greene, but I love Eastern Greene. I still have a ton of friends around there. If I really want to feel comfortable and kind of cut loose, that's where I go with your friends down there. Not to say that I love having friends up here as well, but it's just a different level of comfort that you have. It's like a big family down there. It always has been. And it always will be. And I'm assuming that one of these days I'll be back down there. And once they finish I-69, maybe in the year 2050, I can get down there easier. But it's great. My mom still lives in the same house I grew up in, on the same gravel road in which I lived down. And it's just, you grew up in this era too. Yep. You were just turned loose a lot more, and you also had to figure out on your own things to do that were fun. and things that we probably would get arrested for now in a lot of ways. But
Right.
I wouldn't have traded it for the world. And part of me, Gary's sad because my kids aren't growing up in a similar fashion. I mean, my kids have ridden a school bus like once. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
I rode a school bus all the way until I was 15 years old. And there's just a lot of things they don't do that I think back when I was doing it, and I'm thinking I wouldn't have traded that for the world. So yeah, it was an excellent time, an excellent place to grow up, and I would do it all over again if somebody gave me the opportunity.
Yeah. How about sports? You played sports in high school,
I
didn't you?
did. I played baseball and basketball. We didn't have football at Eastern at that time, but we had baseball and basketball and track and cross country, and I sure as hell wasn't running that. So, the basic sports there. And I love basketball. It was back in the era where, we only knew about the sectional. The sectional is all that mattered there. You didn't even think about a regional or a semi-state or a state. The sectional was for the bragging rights, which certainly is not as prominent today in our era of high school basketball as it was back then. But it was fun. And I lived in a county where our all-star baseball teams, you picked an all-star team from every school, whether it's Bloomfield or Linton or White River Valley, which used to be L&M and Worthington combined, or Shakamak. And you just met, like when I went to college, either Vincennes and then Indiana State. Indiana State was like a big high school for me because everybody from Greene County that I already knew went to Terre Haute and went to Indiana State. And it's fantastic. And I could not imagine growing up. Like I can't imagine going to, and I love Center Grove, and my daughter goes to Center Grove Central. She's 11. My son goes to Roncalli. He's a sophomore. It's a little bit smaller, but I can't imagine going to a school as large as Center Grove.
Yeah.
I can't. Yeah. We had 89, 88 in our graduating class. And it would be a weird feeling going to some place where that may be the size of 2 classes of a hall you walk down on a given day.
Yeah. So you started at Vincennes post high school. You started at Vincennes University, and you got your start. I didn't know this about you because I did the same thing when I was at ISU. You did some weather.
I did. Yeah. This was like the first week. They just kind of threw me on TV. I did the weather, Gary, because I was good at geography.
Yeah.
And
okay.
I was really good at geography in southwestern Indiana. So I knew Knox County, Gibson County, Sullivan County, Greene County, Davies County. I knew the counties that you just cross over the Wabash, when you just, Olney, Illinois, all that area. So they gave me a metal 2-state map. And that was back in the day when you had magnets. So if it was partly sunny, you have a cloud in the sun. If it was rainy, you had the rain. If it was just sunny, you had the sun. And I got that job. I didn't have a suit. I had no suit. I had to go out and buy a suit jacket, and I wore the same thing every night on WVUT. And I did the weather because I was the best at geography.
At geography, yeah.
Yeah. Yep.
Well, I did the weather on weekends when I was at ISU at Channel 2, WTWO there in Terre Haute.
Awesome. Yep.
And it was the best experience I could have had. I knew nothing about the weather. But you get out there and ad lib for 3 or 4 minutes, and so it was a good experience.
Well, you worked with the Channel 2, I'm assuming the legendary Johnny Palmer at that time,
course.
right? Johnny Palmer,
Mark Allen, Kerry Dean, that whole Dennis Campbell.
Campbell. I mean, that's the TV that I grew up on. Like I got Channel 4 because I will always be indebted to Channel 4 because their original broadcasts and ideas. I mean, that is still a staple in my life today. Sammy Terry, Cowboy Bob,
sure.
Cheney. I mean, all their original, IU games, Purdue games, whatever. But Channel 2, I watched Channel 2, the NBC affiliate. So obviously I watched those broadcasts. Channel 10, I remember Harry Fry, Bob Forbes, who did the Indiana State games. And we had 38 was the ABC affiliate, which the signal barely got to Greene County.
Right.
I remember 38. And then, we had to get TV, Gary. We had one of those clackers, right? You had a clacker on top of the TV that you turned east, west, north, or south, and it sounded like somebody used a jackhammer to turn what you had on top of your house, the antenna on your house, the direction in which you were trying to get. So we got the Terre Haute stations, Channel 4, occasionally RTV6, Never Wish, Never 13, occasionally Channel 7, which was the ABC affiliate out of Evansville at the time. And we got occasionally the CBS and the NBC. I think it was Wave, and I can't remember the other one down in Louisville. So that's basically, and I mean, sometimes you had to watch stuff through a lot of interference and snow. It's nothing like today. Again, kids have no idea what we went through to get TV back in the day, Gary.
Just to get a picture.
Nothing.
Yeah, no kidding.
Exactly.
No kidding. Hey, Indiana State, tell me about that. You had a lot of fun there. I did as well. How did Indiana State kind of shape you today, shape your career?
Dave Sabini, the late, great Dave Sabini, turned me loose, Gary. Turned me loose. I mean, I went 2 years at Vincennes and I learned basically everything because they turn you loose as well. You sink or swim at Vincennes. I think oftentimes it's a little known how great they are for broadcasters there. I went 1 year at UIndy because my grandfather was ill in Speedway, and I moved up here and lived with them over the 90-91 year of UIndy. And as much as I loved UIndy, I needed more of the actual college experience. So then I just took a chance and went to Terre Haute. And Paul Younghouse, my advisor, brought me in there. And then I went over to the building, the broadcast building over there, met Dave Sabini, and he turned me loose. I mean, that's what he did. He goes, hey, you're going to do some basketball games. Hey, you're going to do some baseball games. Hey, you can go on the road doing some of these baseball games. And between that and having one heck of a time over there, because I knew everybody already, it was one of the best 2 years of my life. And I would, again, do all that all over again, too, because it seemed like every day was an absolute blast. And I would not have traded that. Whenever anybody says, hey, Indiana State is Terre Haute, it stinks and it's boring. Now, it's boring because you're boring. All right. That's why it's boring. It was daily fun from me. And I would not have traded that experience for anything in the world.
Yeah, post college, and you mentioned your affinity for music, and you like that. You started on the music side, right? B97 in Bloomington.
Yeah, B97 in Bloomington started on weekends. You did weekend overnights back then because before technology, you needed somebody with a heartbeat in there to make sure that one song got to the other and commercials were played. So 6 until midnight, and it was a top 40 station back then. I never could break into that starting lineup until a couple of years later. But, I came in 6 until midnight overnights when I started. I will say this, though. Prior to that, I spent like 3 months at Win 106 in Scipio, Indiana. My first gig, and this is how good I was coming out of college, I was running or observing Dr. Demento on Sunday night from 6 until midnight. Dr. Demento. I got to make sure Dr. Demento did not go off the air at Win 106 WINN, Mount Vernon, Seymour, Columbus. And it was right between all three towns in a town called Scipio, where once upon a time, they couldn't understand why something stunk in the building. And they finally got up in the roof, the ceiling area, and there was a dead possum up there. So it was stinking. But like 3 months of my life right then was I probably wasted more on gas money getting from Greene County to Scipio on the weekends doing that job than I actually made for it. But you know what? It's like I tell anybody else, even now, you never say no to anything.
Right.
You say yes to everything. I worked basically, Gary, up until I was 30. I never saw a Christmas with my family or anybody because I was doing a Christmas job. I did everything that was asked, no matter what. And even if I were asked that today, that's the first thing I would say. You do everything you're asked to do, no matter what it is.
Yeah. Well, there was not a direct line to sports talk radio because you got out of the radio business for a little while.
I did.
You got the mortgage business. What are some of those jobs?
I played basketball with a guy named Eugene Troyer, who had worked part-time at B97 back when I was there, too, because I transitioned. A friend of mine named John McGee, who went as Downtown Johnny at B97, went into being the sales manager there. And I think because we hung out together all the time, he wanted me to hang out more. He said, hey, why don't you go off the air at night and transition into being a sales guy? Well, I was good at talking to people, but I was not a hardcore sales, get that answer and, don't let anybody leave until you close them or anything like that. So I wasn't the greatest salesman. I was just kind of a good communicator, and I like to hang out with people. And then I found out pretty quickly that wasn't going to be the thing. And my now wife, my then girlfriend, said, hey, why don't we move to Greenwood and we'll see if we can find anything up in the Indy area. And of course, I had nothing going on. I actually went to ZPL and applied for a salesperson job and I can't remember the guy's name. I used to make fun of him all the time. But we since kind of buried the hatchet on it. But I used to make fun of him all the time. He brought me in, and at the end of the interview, he said, "Hey, you were awful in this. You were really awful. You
Oh, you
need
kidding?
you need to go back and seriously think about what you're doing here, because there's no way in the world anybody's ever going to hire you." I'll remember his name when we get off here, but I mean, he was just a complete crank to me, Gary.
Oh my
And
gosh.
maybe I was deserving of it, but see, that's one thing I have a long memory, buddy. And
Yeah.
as soon as I cracked the mic and I had the opportunity, I railed all over him. There've been a couple of people that have been in the crosshairs because of situations like that I won't get up off of. And he is certainly one, but he may have had a point, because I joined Eugene Troyer, who was at Moneyline Mortgage, and it was up at the Pyramids. It was literally one of their worst jobs of all time. And they said, hey, this was in February of 1999. They said, hey, if you don't sell whatever by the end of the day, then you're fired. And I knew I wouldn't go sell anything. They tried to send me to somebody's house, and the mortgage didn't make sense. And I actually told the people, I said, I'm going to be honest with you, this is just going to screw you. Don't do it. So,
Yeah.
and that was it. And I got canned. And Eugene was a good dude. I never saw him again. And then I ultimately, I got hired that day, Rob Lauer, and I was working part-time at NDE, running like some sportsman show in the mornings on Saturday mornings. And he said, hey, would you like to come in and produce, or, run the board, produce for the afternoon show? And that's when I started with Bragg and Benner as their producer back in, and I want to say this was the springtime of 1999 is when it was. Yeah.
Yeah.
So, yep.
Well, now that you're certainly riding high with the ride with JMV, I know in researching a little bit, you've said this is a dream job. What's the best part about it? Is it still, some people get a job and they say, hey, this is a dream job, would love it, and then maybe it's an okay job, kind of fades, whatever. How are, in your view, what makes this a great job?
Hey, Gary, it's twofold here. One is I love meeting people. I love talking to people, which automatically makes this perfect. I mean, even when you have to deal with cranks, it is still the best job ever. And I've always taken the advice that was given to me early: if you don't work a day in your life, if you truly love what you do. And I didn't love a lot of the stuff I did up until this point, and this was it. I mean, I truly, I love going in, and I love doing this job. I love going out on the road and doing live shows. I love communicating with the people. I like, kind of pressing to see, what more is out there as far as local. That's kind of why I started this Saturday night thing. Listen, I find probably a lot of better things to do on a Saturday night for 6 hours, but I kind of want to press the envelope a little bit and see what's there. I want to dig around and find out, what's there, how much fun I can have, how much fun others can have, and how much of an enjoyment they get out of that. Much like, this is my philosophy in the afternoon is, while nobody's ever had to say, hey, I wonder if he's telling the truth, because I always am going to tell the truth. And if that means having to dress down a team for a bad performance or a player, then so be it. But the one thing I've learned about this market over the years, Gary, is that at some point you can't be constantly negative. Like, people will say this, hey, you're just negative today because you're stirring the pot. Now there's no stirring the pot, because at some point, I'll give you a great example. Like, if the Colts lose in week 3 to the Titans and they're 0-3 in the season, by the time Wednesday rolls around, you have worn people out on how negative you are about how this stinks and that stinks. And this is how this market works. It doesn't work the same way in Philly or Boston or New York. I mean, they'll go all the way till Friday of just hammering on the Giants or the Jets or whatever. But in this market, people will wear out of just constant negativity, right? And they want to hear it like it is, but at some point, I think you got to back away from that and start looking ahead a little bit, because the problem that you have here is if people wear out on your constant negativity by Wednesday or Thursday, they don't just say, hey, I'm not going to listen to it right now. They go someplace else. And you got to give them a reason every day to be here. I try to give people a reason every day to be here. My monologue, if you will, at 3:00, I always have loose ends at the beginning of it that I want to tie up by about 25 minutes after the hour of 3. And that is the table setter for the rest of the day. And I think people make their choice at the top of every hour, and especially in the 3 o'clock hour, whether or not they want to dedicate their time to listen to you in full. And that's what I want. I don't want 5 minutes. I don't want 10. I want their attention the entirety of the time. And that's hard. I mean, that really is. Because again, you got so many different things coming at you, not to mention just how your life went in the first 8 hours today, how work went, how your personal life is going. And I want to give everybody every reason to be there and stay, not just for 5 minutes, but for 3 hours. And you are constantly trying to find, where the pulse is. And you're riding that pulse until, you kind of get that feeling, the gut feeling that maybe it's kind of played out. And that's how I've always felt about doing 3 hours. It starts with the people. Really, it starts and ends with the people. And I try to give them that, my undivided attention. And I try to make it personal for them to not only have them stay in that moment, but to keep them coming back every day.
Well, John, you have continued to give people many reasons to tune in to your broadcasts each and every day. You make the ride home for a lot of people, including me. Very enjoyable. Really appreciate you taking the time to chat. Yeah. Look forward to seeing you soon.
Gary, thank you very much for asking me. I'll do this anytime.
All right, my friend. We'll talk to you soon. And thank you for joining us on this edition of the Business and Beyond podcast presented by PNC. It's a weekly conversation with achievers in business, sports, entertainment, and beyond. And you can catch all of our episodes and Indiana Business News 24/7 at InsideIndianaBusiness.com. I'm Gary Dick. We'll see you next time.